Hi, good morning. It is the month of October, and as you know, we are celebrating Black History Month. In today's assembly, I'll be talking to you specifically on the Black Lives Matter movement. Who is George Floyd? George Floyd was a lorry driver and a security guard who lived in Minneapolis, USA. On the 25th of May 2020, he went to the shop and paid for his shopping with a fake banknote. It is unclear if George knew the banknote was fake or not. Fake notes were known to be going around in the area, so he may have been given it by another shop. How did he die? The shop owner called the police. The police officers says he was resisting arrest, and this is not supported by CCTV or witnesses, which doesn't help the situation. Outside the shop, the unarmed Mr. Floyd died during the arrest by police officers, one of whom had his knee placed on Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, a restraint tactic banned by most forces. Floyd's death was reawakened deep anger at generations of police brutality.
But first up, we're heading to the city of Minneapolis in the United States, where there have been huge protests over the death of a Black man in police custody. Here's Shaniqua with the details.
Protesters in Minneapolis have clashed with police for a third night in a row. Police officers tried to hold people back, but they couldn't stop another night of looting and rioting, all of which built up to the city's main police station being set on fire. Earlier, the state governor announced he was sending in American soldiers to help control the situation. He said that the time had come not only to rebuild the city, but also the broken relationship between its people and the police. People are angry because of the death of this man, George Floyd, on Monday. The 46-year-old was handcuffed and pinned to the ground by a white police officer who put his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck and held it there. The 4 officers involved in the arrest have since been sacked, but there are growing calls for them to face criminal charges. This is not the first time that the police in the US have been accused of using unnecessary force against Black people or treating them unfairly. 6 years ago, Eric Garner died after being arrested by an officer. Garner's death sparked the Black Lives Matter movement and led to huge protests calling for the end of police brutality in America. Today, demonstrations over George Floyd's death have now spread to other American cities, with anger over the police killings of Black Americans once again at boiling point.
Following the death of George Floyd, there were many news articles published, protests happening, and chaos around the world. Here we can see the protests that happened in June 2020 in the UK. As you can see, people are angry and people are impatient. Here also we see the same thing happening in America. Fires are also happening and people are having their posters bold. Say Their Name was another campaign followed by the Black Lives Matter movement, raising awareness for many Black lives that have been lost. What is Black Lives Matter? Black Lives Matter is an international human rights movement set up in 2013. The movement began when the use of the hashtag Black Lives Matter on social media after the acquittal of George Zimmerman in the shooting and death of Black teen Trayvon Martin in February 2012. It campaigns against violence and systemic racism towards Black people. Through marches, social media, and demonstrations, Black Lives Matter aims to speak out against police killings of Black people and broader issues such as racial profiling, police brutality, and racial inequality.
This is a dedication. Imagine you're at the dinner table with your parents. It's a normal weekday, just like the others. You're having a normal conversation with your parents, and mid-flow between the conversation, you hear breaking news. and a man had been shot for no particular reason. Your now scared parents begin telling you about safety with the police. Imagine this scene. Your parents begin to explain the situation, with one acting as the police and the other telling you to just be calm and do as the officers say. With one hand held high, you say, "I'm just reaching for my wallet." This scene seems unnecessary, but it is exactly what happens in my family, simply because we are Black. Do you think this is fair? Because I don't. So far in America, there has been a great number of Black people who are wrongfully killed by police officers. To be specific, there has been 722 fatal killings, and 3/4 of them were Black. This statistic is ridiculous because Black people only make up 13% of the US population, but are 5 times as more likely to get stopped by the police. Black Lives Matter was introduced when a series of racially motivated killings started to happen in America. It is an international activist movement that originated in the African American community. Black Lives Matter campaigns against the violence and perceived racism of Black people. It also supports the Black families who have been impacted by the wrongful killings from police officers. Did you know that Black suspects are more likely to get wrongfully shot for supposedly having a weapon?
Historians are comparing the 2020 protests to the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, struggle for social justice that took place mainly during the 1950s and 1960s for Black people to gain equal rights under the law. The Civil War had officially abolished slavery in 1865, but it didn't end discrimination against Black people. They continued to endure the devastating effects of racism. African Americans had had enough of prejudice and violence against them. Over decades, they, along with many white people, mobilized and began an unprecedented fight for equality. The UK also underwent a civil rights movement which saw its Black community fight for equality like the US, and that the fight continues today. This can be seen in events such as the Bristol bus boycott, the Notting Hill riots, and the Mansgrove 9 case. BAME. This refers to Black, Asian, and minority ethnic people. Microaggressions. A microaggression is a comment or action that negatively targets a marginalized group of people. They may be accidental or unconscious. Institutional racism. A form of racism expressed in the practice of social and political institutions.
As we can see, racial inequality still happens in America today. If you see at the bottom of these statistics, Black people are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white people. Also in the UK today, we see that ethnic minority people are living in more poverty than white people, and employment rate is much lower than white people. In 2018, 43% of searches were of Black people, while 35.5% were of white people, according to official figures from the London Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime. These figures are disproportionate to population members and highlight institutional and systemic racism. Figures also highlight that police are most likely to stop a Black person than a white person in the UK. The UK Home Office was accused of racism following the Windrush scandal 2018, when Black people came to Britain as children were wrongly told they were here illegally and deported or threatened with deportation. Race hate crimes on Britain's railway networks have risen by 37%. The Grenfell tragedy of 2017 has raised a lot of unanswered questions regarding how low-income BAME communities are supported and listened to by authorities.
By saying Black Lives Matter, we do not mean that other lives do not matter. We are saying that at this moment in time, there is a great need to focus on the racism and discrimination towards Black people as it is so prevalent within society. By saying all lives matter, This is a bland universal statement that seeks to downplay racism and shift the focus off of the Black Lives Matter movement. For example, if your home caught fire and firefighters were spraying water on it to stop it from burning down, would it be reasonable for your neighbours to complain that their houses weren't receiving equal attention? No, it would not be reasonable, and the same applies here. So how can you help more? Challenge inappropriate comments or banter amongst your friends. Research and learn your facts. Reflect, think about your own actions and your own thoughts. Acknowledge, for various reasons, we may have privileges that others don't. That's okay. We cannot pretend that these do not exist. Use your privileges for good. Talk to family and friends. Have difficult conversations. Respectfully challenge points of views. Share information. Post what you find. Spread the message. There are many petitions campaigning for Black Lives Matter. You can also write to your MP. You don't have to be an expert to speak up about racism. Go to speak to your loved ones and call people out when they make mistakes and share what you learn. Think about what you were saying. Beware of microaggressions. Think about how sharing videos of police brutality are desensitizing people to violence against Black people, even though you did it with good intentions. There are also many books you can read. Go to see Mr. Higgins in the library for information on this.
Thank you for listening. I hope you found today's assembly informative and we can move towards making the world a better place.